Mafia boss was having dinner with his fiancée and in-laws until a waitress whispered, "Run now." Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. The evening air in the upscale Manhattan restaurant buzzed with the clinking of glasses and low murmurs of well-dressed patrons. Among the chatter, Emma moved swiftly between the tables, her black uniform blending seamlessly into the shadows. She'd learned long ago how to be invisible, a ghost in the background of the luxurious world around her. The dining area was opulent, chandeliers hanging from the ceiling casting golden light over marble floors, the scent of expensive wine filling the air. It was a world far removed from her own, a world where money meant power and power meant safety. But tonight, Emma's role as a mere waitress would change the course of one man's destiny. At table 7, Dante Romano sat with his fiancée and her parents. The Mafia boss, renowned for his ruthless control over the city, exuded an aura of danger that kept everyone at arm's length. His piercing dark eyes scanned the room, constantly assessing, always alert. Beside him, Caterina, his fiancée, smiled politely, her gaze never straying far from the Mafia boss. The tension in the air was palpable, a mix of admiration and fear from the other patrons who were all too aware of who was seated in their midst. As Emma approached the table with her tray, she noticed the nervous twitch in Caterina's hand. The woman's fingers moved ever so slightly toward her purse. Emma's instincts kicked in. Her brother's last message echoed in her mind. If you see her, don't wait. Run. Katerina Volov. The same woman from the surveillance footage her brother had sent her 6 months ago. The same woman who had ties to the Bratva, the Russian mafia, and the one who had orchestrated her brother's death. Emma's heart raced. She couldn't let this happen. She had to act, but she had no plan. She had nothing but a burning desire to prevent another life from being lost. As she approached the table, Emma's mind raced. She refilled wine glasses with practiced ease, trying to steady her trembling hands. But when Dante's eyes met hers, she froze. For a moment, the world stood still. His gaze was cold, calculating. But there was something else, something that made Emma feel as if he could see straight through her. He was studying her, just as he had been studying everyone else in the room. Her breath caught in her throat. He was watching her every move. Then, in a split second, Emma made her decision. She leaned down toward Dante's ear, her voice barely a whisper, but loud enough to send chills down her spine. Run now. The words felt foreign on her tongue, but they were the only thing she could say. The words that could save his life. Dante's expression didn't change immediately. His face remained impassive, but his eyes, those dark, predatory eyes, narrowed. Emma stepped back quickly, unsure of what was about to happen. But then, Dante did something she didn't expect. He didn't lash out. He didn't demand an explanation. Instead, he stood, his body moving with the fluidity of a predator preparing to strike. Luca, Marco, Dante commanded, his voice low but firm. The 2 bodyguards, who had been stationed discreetly in the corners of the restaurant, instantly moved toward the table. Emma's breath caught in her chest as she realized what was happening. Dante wasn't just reacting to a threat. He was reacting to her warning. He was taking her seriously. The sound of footsteps hurriedly approaching from behind filled Emma's ears. She didn't know what was happening, but she knew she had to get out of the way. As Dante moved, his eyes flicked back to hers, meeting her gaze with a look that sent a wave of unease washing over her. You're with me, he said, his voice sharp. And just like that, the course of the evening shifted. Ignoring the startled whispers of the other diners, Emma stepped back, her heart still pounding in her chest. Dante's bodyguards, Luca and Marco, had already taken their positions around the table, eyes scanning the room for threats. Emma's stomach twisted as she tried to process what had just happened. She had warned him. She had warned the Mafia boss, and now everything had changed. As Dante stood, his sharp eyes locked on hers, his presence more commanding than ever. The air around him seemed to shift, as if he were no longer just a man, but a force of nature. Emma had never imagined she would be this close to someone like him. The kind of person whose name alone sent chills down the spine of anyone who dared utter it. The room suddenly felt too small. The power he exuded was palpable, a pressure that squeezed the air from her lungs. Dante's voice cut through the silence, low and controlled. Stay close. It was not a request. His words hung in the air, a command. He turned, his bodyguards flanking him as they moved toward the back exit of the restaurant. Emma was too stunned to respond, but her legs moved before her mind could catch up. She walked quickly behind him, trying to avoid making any unnecessary noise, her breath shallow as she followed the men through the opulent restaurant. She could feel eyes on her. The other patrons, confused and uneasy, watched the scene unfold in silence. No one dared to approach. No one dared to speak. They were all too aware of who Dante Romano was. The Mafia boss. The man who ruled the underworld with an iron fist, feared by all, respected by few. Emma had never been more aware of her own smallness in the face of such overwhelming power. As they reached the back of the restaurant, Dante's voice was again low and purposeful. We're not done here. His eyes flicked to Emma, and she felt a shiver run down her spine. It wasn't just the danger. It wasn't just the rush of adrenaline that was still coursing through her veins. It was something more, something in the way he looked at her, like she was a puzzle he was beginning to solve. His expression remained unreadable, but there was an intensity in his gaze that made her skin prickle. Do you know who I am? Dante asked suddenly, his voice softer now, almost a whisper. Emma froze, unsure how to answer. She had no idea what he was really asking. Yes, she replied hesitantly, her voice barely audible. I know. The corner of Dante's mouth twitched. Then why did you warn me? His question was not accusatory, but Emma could feel the weight of it. He was testing her, probing her, for something deeper. He was a man who didn't trust easily, and now he was curious about why she had risked everything to help him. Why had she done it? I couldn't let it happen, Emma said, her voice steady despite the whirlwind inside her. I saw the signs. I knew what was coming. Dante nodded, as if he had expected that answer. He turned and walked toward the rear exit of the restaurant. The bodyguards followed, and Emma had no choice but to keep up. They stepped outside into the cool New York evening, the streetlights casting long shadows on the pavement. The night air was sharp against her skin, a stark contrast to the stifling heat inside the restaurant. Emma was still processing everything that had just happened. Her brother's warning, the encounter with Caterina, the assassination attempt, and now this, the way Dante had responded to her. She was caught in a whirlwind of emotions, each one vying for her attention. But above all, there was one question that kept replaying in her mind. Why had Dante reacted like this? Why had he trusted her? You're not safe. Dante's voice broke through her thoughts. He had stopped walking and turned to face her. Not anymore. Emma's heart skipped a beat. She had known the risks. She had known the dangers of warning him, but hearing him say it out loud made everything feel real. She wasn't safe. She had just become a part of a world she barely understood, and there was no turning back now. What do you want from me? She asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. Dante studied her for a long moment, his eyes cold, yet filled with something else, something she couldn't place. I'm going to protect you, and you're going to help me. Emma blinked, her mind racing. Help you? How? Dante's lips curled into a small, dangerous smile. You're already helping me. You've already saved my life. He turned away, his voice now commanding. Get in the car. Without thinking, Emma obeyed, slipping into the back seat of the sleek black car parked at the curb. Dante climbed in beside her, his bodyguards taking their positions in the front. As the car pulled away from the curb, Emma looked out the window, the city's skyline a blur in the distance. She was caught between fear and exhilaration. Her life was about to change in ways she couldn't yet comprehend. And one thing was certain. She was now part of something far bigger than herself. The car's engine hummed softly as it glided through the dark streets of Manhattan, the bright lights of the city a blur outside the windows. Emma sat in silence beside Dante, the weight of the evening pressing down on her. Her mind raced as she tried to comprehend everything that had just happened. She had warned the Mafia boss. She had risked her life to save him, and now she was in his car, heading into a world she had only heard whispers of. The reality of the situation was starting to sink in. She had been thrown into the heart of danger, and there was no turning back. Dante sat across from her, his demeanor cool and composed, as always. But Emma couldn't help but notice the tension in his jaw, the way his fingers tapped rhythmically on the armrest. Even though he wasn't speaking, the air around him felt thick with unspoken words. She wanted to ask him 1,000 questions, but fear held her back. What did he expect from her? What was going to happen next? Was she safe? The car turned a corner, and Emma looked out the window, trying to steady her breathing. The city felt alive, but everything seemed distant, like she was in a dream she couldn't wake up from. Her heart thudded in her chest as she thought about the decision she had made to warn Dante. Could she trust him? She had saved his life, but was he really going to protect hers? Finally, Dante broke the silence, his voice low but commanding. You saved my life tonight. His words were steady, but there was an edge to them, a hint of something deeper, something more personal. Emma turned to face him, her breath catching in her throat. I did what anyone would have done, she replied, trying to sound calm, but she could hear the tremble in her voice. Dante's gaze met hers, and for the first time since she had met him, there was a flicker of something softer in his eyes. Respect? Gratitude? She couldn't be sure. Not everyone would have. You saw something no one else did. You acted when it mattered. That's rare. Emma felt a shiver run down her spine. He was looking at her like she was more than just a waitress, more than just someone in the background of his life. For a moment, she wondered if he was truly grateful or if he was just trying to size her up. Was this how he operated? Was she part of a game, or was this real? The car slowed as it approached a large building. Emma's pulse quickened, and she instinctively sat up straighter. She wasn't sure what to expect, but she knew it was something important. This was no ordinary trip. Dante turned to her, his expression unreadable once again. This is where we part ways for now. Emma's stomach sank. What do you mean? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he opened the car door and stepped out, his bodyguards following him. Emma hesitated for a moment before following suit. As she stepped out onto the curb, she looked up at the building in front of her. It was tall and imposing, the kind of place that oozed wealth and power. But it wasn't just the size of the building that made her nervous, it was what it represented. She was about to enter the world of the Mafia. She was about to be part of something far bigger than herself. Dante turned to her, his voice steady but his eyes sharp. You're safe here. For now. But you'll be under my protection from this moment forward. No one can touch you while you're with me. Emma swallowed hard. The weight of his words settled over her like a heavy cloak. She didn't know what this meant. Was she his prisoner? His ally? Or something else entirely? The uncertainty gnawed at her, but she forced herself to take a step forward, following him into the building. Inside, the atmosphere was just as cold and sterile as the outside. The walls were lined with dark wood, the floors polished to a perfect shine. Emma felt out of place in her simple black uniform, but Dante moved through the space with ease, as though he owned it, and in many ways, he did. He led her down a long hallway to a set of large double doors. As he opened them, Emma felt a rush of anxiety and curiosity. What was behind those doors? What was she walking into? This is where you'll stay for now, Dante said, gesturing toward the room. I'll have someone bring you everything you need. You can rest here. You'll be safe. Emma looked inside. It was a lavish room, decorated with expensive furniture and rich fabrics. But it felt empty, sterile, like a place meant for someone who would never truly live there. She could feel the tension in the air, the weight of the life she had just stepped into. I'm not sure I belong here, she whispered, almost to herself. Dante's voice softened slightly, though it still carried that same sense of authority. You belong here because you chose to act when it mattered. You chose to trust me. Now, I'm giving you my protection. He paused, looking at her carefully. That means something in my world. Emma nodded slowly, trying to make sense of everything. This wasn't just a rescue. This was a commitment, one that would tie her life to his forever. I don't know what's coming next, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Dante's eyes softened for a moment, a flicker of something almost human in them. You'll learn soon enough. But for now, get some rest. Tomorrow, everything will change. As Emma stood there, taking in the reality of the situation, she realized she wasn't just in a new place. She was in a new world, a world where survival meant something entirely different, and where trust came at a dangerous price. The next morning, the sound of the city outside was muffled by the thick curtains in Emma's new room. She had barely slept, her mind racing as she tried to process everything. Her heart still pounded in her chest when she thought about the night before. The restaurant, the warning, Dante's reaction. It felt surreal, like a dream she couldn't wake up from. She had been thrust into a world she didn't understand, and now, she was supposed to live in it. Emma sat up on the bed, the sheets rustling as she looked around the room. It was luxurious, but empty, sterile, like a space that was meant to be lived in, but never truly inhabited. The walls were a soft, neutral color, and the furniture was sleek, expensive, with sharp edges that seemed to reflect the harsh reality she was now facing. She rubbed her eyes, trying to shake off the exhaustion, but the weight of the situation pressed down on her. She was under Dante's protection, but she had no idea what that really meant. A knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. She stood quickly, smoothing out her uniform, before walking to the door. When she opened it, a woman in a professional black suit stood on the other side. She was tall, with short dark hair and a calm, but commanding presence. "Good morning," the woman said, her voice cool, but not unkind. "I'm Maria. Mr. Romano asked me to bring you breakfast and make sure you're settled in." Emma nodded, stepping aside to let her in. As Maria entered, she placed a tray with a simple breakfast on the table: eggs, toast, fresh fruit, and a cup of coffee. Emma's stomach growled at the sight of the food, but she couldn't bring herself to eat just yet. "Mr. Romano wants you to be comfortable here," Maria continued, her tone almost businesslike. "But you should understand, this is temporary. Once things settle down, he'll need you to play your part. For now, you're safe, but that won't last forever." Emma's pulse quickened at the mention of playing a part. She had already made her decision the night before. She had to protect herself, and to do that, she needed to stay close to Dante. But what was her role in this world? What did he expect from her? Maria seemed to sense her hesitation. "You'll learn more soon. Mr. Romano is a man who values loyalty, but he also values power. You've already seen how quickly things can shift in his world. Trust him, but always remember that loyalty is earned." Emma stared at Maria, her mind spinning. "I don't understand," she said quietly. "What exactly am I supposed to do?" Maria didn't answer immediately. Instead, she glanced at the tray of food, then back at Emma. "For now, stay out of the way. Let Dante handle the rest. But when the time comes, you'll need to be ready. You're already in his world, whether you like it or not. And trust me, it's not a world that takes kindly to mistakes." Emma didn't know what to say. Her instinct told her to trust Maria, but she was still so out of her depth. She had never been a part of anything like this before. She had no experience in the dangerous game that Dante played, and yet here she was, thrust into the heart of it. Maria turned to leave, but paused at the door. "And Emma," she said, her voice softening just slightly. "Mr. Romano doesn't trust easily, but he trusts you. Don't forget that." With that, she was gone, leaving Emma standing alone in the room. She glanced at the tray of food again, her appetite returning now that her nerves had settled slightly. She sat down at the table, eating slowly, but her mind was still racing. What did Maria mean by playing her part? What was her role in all of this? As she finished her meal, a knock came at the door again. This time, it was Dante, standing in the doorway, his dark eyes focused on her with that same intense gaze. His presence filled the room, and for a moment, Emma couldn't speak. She wasn't sure if it was his power, his quiet strength, or the way he seemed to see straight through her that made her feel so small. "Good morning," Dante said, his voice calm, but there was something in his tone that made her heart race. "How did you sleep?" Emma stood up quickly, the chair scraping against the floor. I didn't sleep much. Just thinking." Dante nodded, his eyes never leaving hers. "That's understandable. But we don't have much time. There's something I need you to do." Emma's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" "Come with me," Dante said, turning on his heel and heading toward the door. "It's time for you to see what happens next." Emma's stomach dropped. She didn't know what he was talking about, but she knew one thing for sure. She wasn't getting out of this world anytime soon. Dante had just pulled her deeper into his world, and now, there was no going back. Emma followed Dante down the long, polished hallway, the sound of their footsteps echoing off the walls. The building was massive, each room more luxurious than the last, and the tension between them was palpable. She had no idea where they were going, but Dante's demeanor had shifted. There was no time for small talk now, no room for questions. She had been warned, and she could feel the weight of his words from the previous night. This was just the beginning. She wasn't sure what next meant, but something told her she wasn't going to like it. They reached a large, secure-looking door at the end of the hallway, its surface sleek and black, with a single small light above it. Dante paused, his hand resting on the cold metal. He glanced back at her, his eyes unreadable, and then he pushed the door open without hesitation. The moment she stepped inside, Emma was hit with the unmistakable scent of cigars and leather. The room was dark, only the faint glow of a few desk lamps breaking through the shadows. Men were scattered around the room, sitting at desks, talking in hushed voices. The air was thick with the tension of people who were used to dealing with danger. Dante didn't say a word as he walked in, and the room seemed to quiet the moment he entered. The men at the desk straightened, their eyes instinctively following him. There was something about Dante that commanded attention, something about the way he moved, the way he spoke. Even though she had been around him now for what felt like hours, she still couldn't shake the feeling that this was a man who wasn't just in control of a room. He was in control of everything. One of the men stood up, a tall figure with a thick beard and sharp eyes. "Everything's ready, boss," he said, his voice low and respectful. Dante gave him a brief nod, acknowledging the statement. He didn't smile, didn't show much emotion at all, but Emma could see the way the other men watched him, the way they respected him. "Emma," Dante finally spoke, turning to face her. "This is the real world. You're about to see things that most people never will." He paused for a moment, his gaze narrowing slightly. "And you'll need to make your choice. You can walk away right now, and I'll let you go. Or you can stay, and you'll be part of this life." Emma's stomach twisted, and for a split second, her mind screamed at her to walk away, to run as far as possible. But her feet didn't move. Something inside her, the same instinct that had made her warn him the night before, kept her rooted in place. She knew that once she stepped into this world, there would be no going back. "I don't have a choice, do I?" Emma asked, her voice steady despite the uncertainty rising in her chest. Dante's gaze softened. Just a fraction, but it was enough to tell her that he understood what she was saying. "No," he replied simply. "Not anymore." He turned back to the man with the thick beard. "Make sure everything's in place. We move out in 10 minutes. The man nodded and left the room, his footsteps retreating into the distance. Emma's mind was still racing, trying to piece together what was happening. She had been thrust into a world where survival was about more than just being quick or smart. It was about loyalty, power, and understanding how to play the game. But was she ready for this? Was she ready to be part of Dante's world? Dante walked over to a large desk in the corner, where a stack of papers lay. He picked up a folder and flipped through it with the same deliberate care he used when he spoke. "You're going to be a part of this, whether you like it or not," he said, his back still turned to her. "You've already made your choice by helping me last night. Now, you need to decide how far you're willing to go." Emma's heart raced. She had known it was coming, but hearing it out loud made the truth even more real. "What do you want me to do?" she asked quietly. Dante finally turned to face her, and his expression was unreadable. "You'll learn soon enough. You're here because I trust you. I wouldn't have brought you into this world if I didn't think you had the skills. But trust goes both ways. From now on, you'll be working with me. You'll be the eyes and ears I need in places no one else can go. And in return, I'll keep you safe." The promise hung in the air, thick with meaning. Emma knew what he was saying, but she wasn't sure if she believed him. Could she really trust him? The man who ruled the underworld? The man who had built his empire on secrets and shadows? She looked at him, trying to read the truth in his eyes, but they were as dark and unreadable as ever. She had no choice but to follow him, to play her part in a game she didn't fully understand. "I'll do whatever it takes," Emma said, her voice steady now, her resolve hardening. Dante's lips curled slightly, almost imperceptibly. "Good. I'm glad you understand. Now, let's see if you can handle what comes next." He turned toward the door, and Emma followed him, her heart pounding in her chest. She had made her choice, and there was no going back. She was part of this world now, whether she was ready for it or not. Emma stepped into the dimly lit room, the door closing softly behind her. She had barely taken a moment to process the gravity of the situation when Dante spoke, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "Sit." His command was simple, but it was enough to make Emma's heart skip a beat. The chair in front of the large wooden desk seemed to beckon her. Hesitating for just a moment, she walked toward it, her movements careful and deliberate. She had already made her choice. There was no turning back now. She had to commit to the world Dante had pulled her into, and every moment felt like she was diving deeper into something far beyond her control. The room was cold, and the air smelled faintly of leather and cigar smoke. The only light came from the desk lamp, casting long shadows across the walls. Dante stood by the window, his back to her, staring out into the night, as if he were lost in thought. Emma sat down in the chair, her fingers tapping nervously on the armrest. The silence was suffocating, and she could feel the tension building with each passing second. Finally, Dante turned, his expression hard but not unkind. "You're here because I trust you," he said, his voice calm. But there was a weight to his words. "You've already proven that you can act when it matters. But now, I need to know if you can handle the consequences of your actions." Emma swallowed hard. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice steady despite the rising anxiety in her chest. Dante's eyes locked onto hers, and for the first time since she had met him, she saw something close to vulnerability in them. It was fleeting, but it was there. "This life, Emma," he began, his voice low and serious, "isn't just about power or control. It's about loyalty. It's about understanding the consequences of your choices and accepting that you may not always have the luxury of turning back." He paused for a moment as if weighing his next words carefully. "You're already in the game. But now, you need to decide if you can stay in it. If you can do what needs to be done." Emma sat up straighter, her heart pounding in her chest. She knew what he was asking her. He wasn't just talking about surviving in his world. He was asking if she could live with the decisions she would have to make. The choices that could change everything. Could she live with the blood on her hands if it came to that? Could she stay loyal to Dante, even if it meant doing things she never thought herself capable of? "You're asking me if I can kill?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dante didn't flinch, didn't hesitate. "If it comes to that," he said, his voice steady, "the people I protect, those who are loyal to me, are the only ones who matter. Everyone else is expendable. That's the nature of this world." The words hit Emma like a punch to the stomach. Expendable. She had known this was the reality of the life she had been drawn into, but hearing it from Dante made it feel more real, more terrifying. She wasn't just a bystander anymore. She was a player in this game, whether she liked it or not. "I understand," she said quietly, her voice tinged with fear but also a growing sense of resolve. Dante studied her for a long moment, his gaze piercing, as if he were reading her every thought. Finally, he nodded. "Good. Because the time to prove your loyalty is coming." He turned back, toward the window, his posture still rigid. "There's a man, Salvatore Grimaldi. He's been trying to make moves on my territory. I've given him plenty of chances to back off, but he doesn't understand the word no." He turned to face Emma again, his eyes darkening with a cold intensity. "I need you to go to him, convince him to step back. And if he doesn't, I need you to make sure he never threatens me again." Emma felt the blood drain from her face. "You want me to do what?" she asked, her voice shaking slightly. Dante's expression didn't change. "I'm not asking you to kill him," he said, but the coldness in his voice made it clear that he wouldn't hesitate if that's what it took. "But I need you to get close to him. Use your position, your access. Do whatever you need to do to make sure he understands that crossing me isn't an option. If you can't do this, then you're no use to me. But if you can, you'll have earned your place here." Emma's heart pounded in her chest as she tried to process his words. She had seen the violence in Dante's world, but to be asked to take part in it, directly, was something else entirely. This wasn't just a warning anymore. This was a test of her loyalty. She stood up, her legs shaking, but her resolve hardening. "I'll do it," she said, her voice firm. Dante's eyes locked onto hers again, his gaze unwavering. "Good," he said, his voice low. "Because if you fail, there's no coming back from it." Emma nodded, a chill running down her spine. She had crossed the line, and now there was no turning back. She wasn't just part of Dante's world anymore. She was a player in it, and the game had only just begun. Emma's heart raced as she stepped into the sleek, modern building that belonged to Salvatore Grimaldi. She had been briefed on the mission, but nothing could prepare her for the reality of it. She had walked into Dante's world, and now, she was about to enter the domain of one of his enemies. The weight of the task ahead pressed down on her like a heavy stone, but there was no turning back. The lobby was clean and cold, marble floors reflecting the harsh fluorescent lights overhead. Everything about this place screamed money, power, and a level of control Emma could barely comprehend. She walked toward the elevator, her steps deliberate, but inside, she could feel the knots in her stomach tightening. Her role in this world had already been defined by Dante. She was here to gain Grimaldi's trust, to convince him to back down without ever revealing her true allegiance. The elevator doors opened with a soft ding, and Emma stepped inside, pressing the button for the top floor. She watched as the numbers above the door slowly ticked upward, her palms sweating as the elevator ascended. She had to keep her composure. She had to keep everything in check. One mistake, one slip-up, and her life could be over. The elevator stopped, and the doors slid open to reveal a long corridor with black and white photographs lining the walls. At the end of the hall, a large door marked Grimaldi's office stood like a fortress. Emma took a deep breath and walked toward it, each step heavier than the last. As she reached for the doorknob, she heard a voice from behind her. "Can I help you, miss?" Emma turned to face a man in a sharp suit, his eyes scanning her with an almost predatory gaze. His posture was rigid, and his expression unreadable, but there was something in the way he watched her that made Emma uneasy. "I'm here to see Mr. Grimaldi," she said, forcing her voice to remain calm. The man nodded, stepping aside to let her pass. As she walked into the office, the first thing that hit her was the smell: rich leather, expensive cologne, and the faint, acrid scent of cigars. Grimaldi's office was just as sleek as the rest of the building, but it had an unsettling feeling to it. The walls were lined with shelves filled with books and sculptures, and the desk at the far end of the room was stacked with paperwork and ledgers. Behind the desk sat Salvatore Grimaldi, a man whose reputation alone could make a person's blood run cold. His black suit fit him perfectly, his eyes hidden behind dark sunglasses that seemed to see everything. He didn't even look up as Emma entered, and for a moment, she wondered if he knew she was there. "Sit down, Miss Carter," he said, his voice low and smooth. Emma stiffened. He knew her name. How much did he know about her? About her past? She hesitated for a second, then sat in the chair across from his desk. She forced herself to relax, to appear calm, but her mind was racing. Grimaldi finally looked up, his dark eyes piercing through the sunglasses. "I have to admit, I'm curious," he said, leaning back in his chair. "Why are you here? Dante's little pawn. Are you trying to make me back down, or is there something more you're after?" Emma's breath caught in her throat. She had been prepared for the interrogation, but hearing it from Grimaldi made her nervous in a way she hadn't expected. She could feel the weight of his gaze, his power, as if it was pressing down on her from all sides. But she had to keep her cool. She had to play her part. "I'm here because I know that you're making a mistake," she said, her voice steady but quiet. "Dante doesn't want war, but he will defend what's his. You've already crossed a line, and if you don't back off, things will get much worse." Grimaldi's lips curled into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You think you can threaten me, Miss Carter? You think you can come into my office and talk to me like that? I don't need anyone to defend me. Not you, and certainly not Dante." Emma's heart raced, but she kept her composure. "I'm not threatening you, Mr. Grimaldi," she said, her tone cold. "I'm just telling you the truth. You don't want to go to war with him. It's not something you can win." Grimaldi stood up slowly, his gaze never leaving hers. He walked around the desk and stood in front of her, his presence towering over her. "You think you can walk into my office and lecture me about what I want? You think you can come in here and change things with just a few words? I think I can make you understand that what you're doing is going to get you killed," Emma replied, her voice sharp. Grimaldi's smile faded, and for the first time since she had entered the room, his eyes seemed to flash with something real: anger, frustration, but also a hint of respect. "You're bold, I'll give you that," he said quietly. "But you're also wrong. Dante has made a mistake, and I'm going to make him regret it." Emma's heart raced. She had to act fast. "No, you're the one making the mistake," she said, standing up and stepping closer to him. "If you don't back off, Dante will come for you. And when he does, no one will be able to stop him." Grimaldi stared at her for a long moment, and just as Emma thought she had failed, he finally nodded. "I'll think about it," he said, his voice softening. "But if Dante wants to play this game, he'll regret it." Emma left his office, her heart still pounding in her chest. She had done it. She had walked into Grimaldi's lair and convinced him to reconsider. But she knew this was far from over. There was still so much more to do, and she wasn't sure if she could trust Grimaldi to keep his word. The tension between the two men was growing, and it wouldn't be long before the game became deadly. But for now, she had bought herself some time. And time was the one thing she needed most. As she left the building and stepped into the street, the weight of the world seemed to settle on her shoulders. She had done what Dante asked, but she was starting to realize the full cost of playing this game. Emma stood in front of the sleek, glass building, the weight of the day pressing down on her shoulders. Her mission had been a success, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something deeper was at play. Grimaldi had agreed to back off, for now, but Emma knew that in this world, agreements were fleeting. Things could shift in an instant, and when they did, people like her would be caught in the crossfire. She looked up at the towering structure before her, the reflection of the city's skyline casting a cold, unwelcoming light across its surface. She wasn't sure if it was the glass that made the building feel like a prison or the fact that it was the center of a power struggle she had barely begun to understand. As she entered the building, her phone buzzed in her pocket. The notification was brief, just a single word, "Come." It was from Dante. Her heart skipped a beat. He had been quiet since their last meeting, and though she had done everything he asked, she had no idea what he wanted now. He had made it clear that this game was never over. Even if she survived today, tomorrow would bring another challenge, another test. Emma quickly made her way to the elevator, her mind spinning with possibilities. What had she done right? What had she done wrong? She wasn't naive enough to believe that Dante would trust her just because she succeeded in one task. Loyalty was never freely given in this world, and she was still unproven in his eyes. She was his ally, for now, but how long would that last? The elevator doors opened to Dante's private floor. This part of the building was quieter, more secure, and it felt like she was stepping into a different world entirely. She was met by Marco, one of Dante's trusted bodyguards, who nodded at her and gestured for her to follow. There was no need for words. Emma knew the drill by now. She followed Marco down the hallway, the sound of their footsteps echoing in the otherwise quiet space. When they reached the door, Marco knocked, then pushed it open without waiting for a response. Dante was standing by the window, his back to her. He looked out over the city, his posture rigid, but there was a stillness about him that suggested he was deep in thought. "You're late," Dante's voice came, but it wasn't harsh. It was more of a statement, as though he already knew why she was late. Emma hesitated for a moment, then stepped forward. "I was finishing up my business with Grimaldi," she replied, her tone steady. Dante turned slowly, his dark eyes studying her. "I'm aware. I've been watching," he said, his voice taking on a more dangerous edge. "But I didn't bring you here for small talk. We have bigger problems now." Emma's pulse quickened. "What do you mean?" Dante's gaze never wavered. He walked over to a table where a folder lay open, filled with documents and photographs. "Grimaldi may have backed down, but there's something else going on. Something bigger than him." He picked up one of the photographs and handed it to her. It was a picture of a man she didn't recognize. His features were sharp, calculating, but there was an unfamiliar symbol on his jacket, a symbol that was too familiar to her for comfort. She'd seen it before, back when her brother was still alive, working as an analyst for the FBI. The symbol belonged to a criminal syndicate that Dante had been trying to destroy for years, the Volkov family. Emma's stomach dropped. "The Volkovs," she whispered. Dante nodded, his face grim. "They've been making moves in the city, and now it's clear they've been targeting us. It's not just Grimaldi who's a threat. The Volkovs have aligned themselves with some of the most dangerous players in this world, and I have no intention of letting them take what's mine." Emma's mind was racing. The Volkovs were a name whispered in the darkest corners of the city, feared by even the most hardened criminals. They weren't just a family, they were a powerful network, with connections everywhere, from politics to law enforcement. And now they were after Dante. After everything he had built. "I need you to get close to them," Dante continued, his voice low. "I need you to gather information. Everything. The more we know, the better we can strike before they get too comfortable." Emma's throat went dry. "How am I supposed to get close to them?" Dante's lips curled into a faint smile, though it was void of warmth. "You already know how to play the game, Emma. Use whatever means necessary. Get close. Be convincing. They'll trust you." But don't let them think you're anything more than what you are, a pawn in their game. Emma nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. She had already made one decision, but this was different. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about loyalty, power, and finding a way to navigate a world where trust could mean life or death. The Volkovs weren't just a threat. They were the kind of enemy that could destroy everything. I understand, Emma said, her voice steady, though her mind was still reeling. Dante's eyes softened for just a moment. I'm counting on you, Emma. Don't make me regret trusting you. With that, he turned back to the window, his posture stiff once again, and Emma was left standing there, the weight of her task settling on her shoulders. She wasn't just a part of the game anymore. She was a player in a high-stakes battle, and this time, there was no way out. She had one mission: infiltrate the Volkovs, gain their trust, and if she failed, there would be no second chances. Emma stood outside the Volkov estate, the massive gates looming in front of her like a barrier she had to cross. The mansion behind them was imposing, built with polished stone and surrounded by lush gardens that made it look more like a fortress than a home. It was everything she had expected, a place where power was not just flaunted, but deeply ingrained in every aspect of life. She had come here to infiltrate, to gather intelligence, but what she didn't expect was how much this place would make her question her own decisions. She had already sent a message to Dante, letting him know she had arrived. Now, it was time to do what she was here for. The Volkov family was known for its ruthlessness, and Emma wasn't sure if she was ready for what she had to do. She had already crossed lines to get this far, but the idea of getting too close to them, of pretending to be one of them, made her feel exposed. She could feel the eyes of the guards watching her from behind the gates, sizing her up. "Can I help you, miss?" A voice called out from behind her, startling her out of her thoughts. Emma turned to face the guard, a tall man in a black suit who didn't look particularly friendly. His eyes were cold, and his stance was one of caution, as if he already knew she didn't belong here. "I'm here to see Mr. Ivan Volkov," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. She had rehearsed this moment in her head countless times, but now that she was standing here, it felt like a game of high-stakes poker. One wrong move, and everything could come crashing down. The guard eyed her for a moment, then nodded curtly. "Follow me." He turned and led her through the gates, which creaked as they opened, revealing a long path lined with tall trees. The air smelled of fresh earth, the kind of smell that belonged to wealth and power. Emma followed him in silence, her heart pounding with each step. She had to be careful. She had to stay in character, make sure every move was calculated. As they approached the front doors, Emma couldn't help but glance up at the mansion. It was a place that could swallow you whole, a world where secrets were kept in shadows and loyalty was bought with blood. She had never felt more out of place, but she had a job to do. She couldn't afford to show any weakness. The guard knocked once, and the door opened immediately. A well-dressed woman with blonde hair tied in a neat bun stood there. She didn't look surprised to see Emma, but she didn't look welcoming either. "You must be the one Mr. Volkov is expecting," the woman said, her tone cool and businesslike. "Come in." Emma stepped inside, her eyes scanning the opulent hallway. The walls were decorated with expensive paintings, and the floor was covered in intricate rugs that spoke of old money. The mansion was beautiful, but it had an air of coldness to it. It didn't feel like a home. It felt like a place built for control. "Mr. Volkov is in his study," the woman said, leading Emma down a long hallway. They passed several rooms, each one more luxurious than the last, but Emma's mind was focused on the task at hand. She was here to get close to Ivan Volkov, to figure out what his next move was. She needed to get inside his head, to make him trust her enough to let her in. The study was at the end of the hall, a large double door that seemed to loom over her as they approached. The woman knocked twice before opening the door. "Mr. Volkov, your guest is here," she said, stepping aside to allow Emma in. Ivan Volkov was sitting behind a massive desk, his hands clasped in front of him. He didn't look up at first, but Emma could feel his gaze as she entered. The air around him seemed to crackle with authority, and the room itself felt like it had been designed to intimidate anyone who stepped inside. "You're the woman from Dante's side," Ivan said, finally lifting his eyes to meet hers. His voice was smooth, calm, and yet there was an edge to it that made Emma's skin prickle. He didn't offer her a seat, but she took one anyway, sitting down across from him without a word. I've heard about you, he continued, his eyes studying her intently. Dante speaks highly of you. I wonder why he sent you to meet me, though. You don't seem like the type to play the middleman. Emma kept her posture straight, her face neutral. I'm here to discuss business, she said, her voice measured and professional. I'm not here to play games, Mr. Volkov. I understand there's an opportunity to talk terms. Ivan raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. Talk terms? You come into my home, sit across from me, and offer to talk terms. Dante may have made it clear that he trusts you, but you're not in his world anymore. You're in mine. His tone was still calm, but the warning was there, buried beneath the layers of politeness. Emma could feel the tension in the room thickening, but she refused to back down. I'm well aware of the risks, Mr. Volkov, she said, locking eyes with him. But I think you'll find that I'm someone you can trust. I'm here because we can help each other. Ivan leaned back in his chair, his gaze never leaving hers. The silence between them stretched for a long moment, and Emma knew that every word from here on out mattered. Finally, Ivan spoke, his voice lower now, almost contemplative. You'll have to do better than that. Words don't mean anything in my world. Actions, on the other hand, they speak volumes. Emma nodded, knowing that this was just the beginning. She had made it this far, but she knew the real test was yet to come. She had to prove herself, to show Ivan Volkov that she wasn't just a pawn in someone else's game. She was a player, and she had the power to change the course of everything. As she sat there, the stakes had never been higher. She wasn't just here to play. She was here to win. Emma sat in the dimly lit study, the tension between her and Ivan Volkov thickening with every passing moment. The words they exchanged had been polite, measured, but both of them knew the truth. This was a game, a dangerous one, where one wrong move could turn everything upside down. Ivan had made it clear that action spoke louder than words, and she was about to prove that she could play by his rules. She had made it this far, stepping carefully between loyalty and survival, but the true test was now. Ivan leaned back in his chair, studying her with that calculating gaze. His silence was more powerful than any threat. It was as though he were waiting for her to crack, waiting to see if she was really the player she claimed to be or just another pawn. Emma knew that she had to be careful. Every glance, every word, every movement mattered. She had been trained to read people, to understand their motives before they even knew what they wanted. It was her greatest asset, and right now, she needed it more than ever. Finally, Ivan spoke again, his voice low and deliberate. I've been watching you, Emma, he said, his eyes never leaving hers. You're not like the others. You're more calculated, more composed. I can respect that. Emma's heart skipped a beat. This was the moment. She had to press her advantage. I'm here because I believe we can help each other, she said, leaning forward. Slightly. The tension between you and Dante has been growing for a while, and if it continues, it will tear this city apart. But if you back off, there's a chance for peace. I'm not just offering words. I can make it happen. Ivan's expression remained impassive, but she could see the flicker of curiosity in his eyes. You think you can stop a war with a few words? He asked, his voice laced with skepticism. It's not just words. It's action. If you let me help, I'll make sure you come out on top, with everything you need to destroy Dante once and for all. Ivan leaned forward, his elbows resting on the desk. And why would I trust you? Emma felt the weight of his gaze and took a deep breath. Because I'm the only one who can get close to him. I've already proven that I can move in his circles, gain his trust. I can be the one who breaks him from the inside. Ivan was quiet for a moment, his eyes narrowing as he processed her words. Emma held her breath, waiting for him to make his move. This was the turning point. She had to make him see that she was an asset, not just a tool. Finally, Ivan stood, walking to the window and gazing out at the city below. The lights of Manhattan twinkled in the distance, a reminder of how much was at stake. You're bold, Emma, he said, his voice softening just slightly. I like that, but you have to understand something. I didn't get to where I am by trusting anyone easily. If you want to play this game, you have to prove you can survive it. And you have to show me that you're not just another pawn in this war. Emma stood up, walking over to him slowly. She had made her choice. She wasn't going to back down. I'm ready to do whatever it takes, she said, her voice steady. Ivan turned to face her, his expression unreadable. He studied her for a moment before nodding. Good. Then you'll get your chance. But remember, Emma, this world doesn't have room for weakness. If you falter, you're out. She nodded, feeling the weight of his words settle over her. This was the moment she had been waiting for, the point of no return. I won't fail, she said, her voice firm. Ivan smiled slightly, a cold, calculating smile that didn't reach his eyes. We'll see about that. With that, he turned away, walking to the desk where a phone sat, untouched. He picked it up and dialed a number, speaking in a language Emma didn't understand. She knew that whatever happened next, her life would never be the same. She had crossed a line, and now there was no turning back. As she stood there, watching Ivan make his call, she couldn't help but feel the weight of the choices she had made. She was in too deep now, caught between two powerful forces. And no matter what happened, she had to stay ahead of the game. She had to prove that she was not just another pawn, she was a player. And players didn't lose. She wouldn't let herself lose. Emma stood on the rooftop, the cold wind biting through her jacket as she gazed out over the city. The skyline of Manhattan stretched before her, the glowing lights below a stark contrast to the darkness swirling in her mind. The weight of the mission she had just undertaken was heavy, but what was even heavier was the fact that she had no idea what was coming next. Ivan had given her the task, and now it was time to follow through, but she was beginning to realize just how far she had fallen into this world. Dante had told her that trust was earned, that loyalty was a dangerous game, and now, with Ivan Volkov's power looming over her, she had a chance to prove herself. But at what cost? The meeting with Ivan had left her unsettled. He was more calculating than she had imagined, and his ability to see through her every word, every move, made her question whether she could truly survive in this world. She had made a choice, but that choice was leading her further down a path she might not be able to return from. As the wind whipped around her, she heard footsteps behind her. She didn't need to turn around to know who it was. Dante's presence was unmistakable, the weight of his authority almost palpable. He stepped beside her, his eyes trained on the city below, not bothering to acknowledge her directly. "You did well," Dante said, his voice calm, but there was something guarded about it. She glanced at him, but his expression was unreadable. "I did what you asked," she replied, her voice steady, though inside, her nerves were still rattling. "But I'm not sure if I can trust him." Dante turned to face her, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Trust doesn't matter here. You know that. It's about power. The game we're playing isn't about who you trust. It's about who has control." Emma nodded slowly, her mind processing his words. She had heard it before, but now it felt different. Now, as she stood on this rooftop, on the edge of something far more dangerous than anything she had faced before, the reality of what she had become a part of hit her hard. "So what happens now?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dante's gaze softened for a brief moment, but the coldness in his eyes quickly returned. "Now we wait. We gather information. You did well with Volkov, but this isn't over. The Volkovs are just a piece of the puzzle. If we don't move quickly, we risk losing everything." Emma looked out over the city again, the weight of his words settling into her chest. She had always known that Dante was more than just a mafia boss, but standing here with him now, in this quiet moment, she realized just how much power he held. This wasn't just about territory or wealth. It was about control over every aspect of life, over every movement in the city. And she had willingly stepped into that world. "Do you ever regret it?" Emma asked, her voice barely audible against the wind. Dante's eyes flicked to her, his expression hardening again. "Regret is for the weak," he said, his tone flat. "This is who I am. This is who I've always been. And you're here because you chose this." His words hit her like a slap, but she didn't flinch. She had chosen this. She had chosen to align herself with him, to be part of his world. "And you'll stay with me, right?" Dante continued, his voice softer now. There was a strange intensity in his gaze, as if he were asking more than just about her loyalty. It was a question she hadn't expected, but one that felt like it held more weight than anything else. Emma hesitated for a moment, her mind racing. She could say yes, could play the part and continue down this path, but she wasn't sure anymore if she wanted to be in this world at all. "I'm not sure," she finally admitted, her voice steady but uncertain. Dante didn't seem surprised by her answer. Instead, he took a step closer, his eyes narrowing slightly. "You're not sure?" His voice was tinged with amusement, but there was an edge to it. "You've already proven yourself to me. Now you have to prove it to yourself." Because once you're in this world, there's no way out. You either stay or you fall. Emma swallowed hard, her throat dry. She knew what he meant. Once she had entered this world, there was no turning back. If she walked away now, it would be worse than if she had never stepped into it at all. Dante took a deep breath, his gaze softening again, though the intensity never fully left his eyes. You're stronger than you think. But you have to choose your path. No one can make that choice for you. His words lingered in the air, and Emma felt a strange sense of clarity settle over her. She had been caught between two worlds, Dante's world and the world she had left behind. But now, standing in front of him, she realized that there was no such thing as both. She couldn't live in both worlds. She had to pick one, and that decision would shape everything. I choose this, she said finally, her voice firm. Dante's lips curled into a small, approving smile. Good, he said simply. Then let's get to work. As Emma followed him back into the building, she knew that the path ahead would be darker, more dangerous, and more unforgiving than anything she had faced before. But she also knew that it was the path she had chosen, and there was no turning back. The game was just beginning. The days that followed Emma's decision to fully commit to Dante's world were a whirlwind of meetings, tense discussions, and dangerous maneuvers. She had been placed in the center of a complex web of lies, manipulation, and power struggles. Each day, she found herself deeper entangled in a world that seemed both exhilarating and terrifying. But it was a world where survival required more than just strength. It demanded loyalty, cunning, and an unshakable resolve. Dante had made it clear that there was no turning back, and Emma had already proven herself by gaining Volkov's trust. But that had only been the beginning. Now, she was expected to play an even larger role, one that she wasn't entirely sure she was ready for. It was late one evening when Dante called her into his office. Emma could feel the weight of the invitation. Something important was about to happen. As she entered the room, she found him standing by the window, looking out over the city, his profile sharp and imposing in the low light. The air in the room was thick with the tension of the moment, and Emma's pulse quickened. She had come to realize that Dante never invited her in without a reason. He was a man of action, not idle conversation. You've done well so far, Dante said, his voice low, almost casual, but there was a depth to his words that made Emma's heart skip a beat. You've gained their trust. Now it's time for the next step. He turned to face her, his expression unreadable. Emma took a deep breath, waiting for him to elaborate. The Volkovs had agreed to a temporary truce, but Dante had always warned her that peace in their world was fleeting. The fact that he had been watching her every move only confirmed that the stakes had been raised. She could feel the weight of his expectations bearing down on her. I'm ready, she said, her voice steady, though inside, she could feel the anxiety creeping in. Dante gave her a sharp, assessing look. Are you? Because this next move isn't like the others. This will test your loyalty, your resourcefulness. You've gained their trust, but now you need to learn their weaknesses. You need to find the cracks in their armor. Emma nodded, understanding the gravity of what he was asking. She had come this far, but if she failed now, it could mean her life. She wasn't naive. She knew that the Volkovs, while seemingly open, were ruthless in their ambition. They would use her, just as she was using them. The difference was that if she got caught, there would be no second chances. Don't worry, Dante continued, his voice now tinged with a more serious tone. I'll be watching. I'm not letting you walk into the lion's den alone. But I need to know you can handle what's coming. I need to know you'll stay loyal, no matter what. Emma met his gaze, her resolve hardening. She had already made her choice. She was in this now, and there was no turning back. I will, she said, her voice unwavering. I'll do whatever it takes. Dante's lips curled into a small, approving smile. It was rare, but when it appeared, it was more dangerous than any anger he might show. Good, he said simply. Because what happens next won't be easy. You'll have to be smarter, more careful than ever before. If you slip up, they'll know. And if they know, it's over. With that, Dante turned and walked toward his desk, retrieving a file from the drawer. He handed it to her without a word, and Emma took it, her hands steady as she opened it. Inside were photos, details of people she didn't recognize, names of contacts, and places that seemed to be key to the Volkov family's operation. There was also a map, pinpointing locations where Volkov's influence stretched. Emma studied the file carefully, her mind racing as she absorbed the information. This was her next step, getting closer to Ivan Volkov and the people who served him, learning their deepest secrets. Use this, Dante said, his voice now more measured. But remember, no one can know about it. If anyone suspects you're working with me, they'll turn on you. You're already deep in their world. Now, you have to dig deeper. Emma felt the weight of his words settle in her chest. The file was a weapon, but so was she. She had learned quickly that in Dante's world, knowledge was power. And with the right knowledge, she could take control, just like he had. But it wasn't going to be easy. Go, Dante said, his tone shifting to the familiar command that told her their conversation was over. And remember, Emma, this is the real test. Prove to me that you can handle it. As she left the room, the door clicking shut behind her, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that she had just crossed a line from which there would be no return. But she had made her choice. And now, she had to see it through. The next phase of the game was about to begin. But for Emma, the rules had already changed. She was no longer just an observer. She was a player, and she had to make every move count. The danger that had loomed over her for so long was now a constant presence, a reminder that every step she took could be her last. But Emma wasn't afraid. She was ready to face whatever came next. Emma stood at the edge of the rooftop once again, the wind tousling her hair as she looked out over the city. The lights below twinkled like a million stars, each one representing a different life, a different story. But for Emma, the city had become a prison. No matter how many times she tried to convince herself otherwise, she was still trapped in a world she didn't fully understand. She had come this far, but now, more than ever, she realized there was no going back. The Volkovs had made their move, and now it was Dante's turn to retaliate. Emma had done her part, infiltrating their world, gaining their trust. But now, she had to act. The next phase was dangerous, and Dante had made it clear that failure wasn't an option. She had crossed a line from which there was no return, and she had to prove her loyalty, not just to Dante, but to herself. The sound of footsteps behind her broke her from her thoughts. She didn't need to turn around to know who it was. Dante's presence was unmistakable, his cold, calculated energy filling the space around her. As he walked closer, Emma felt the weight of his gaze, even without looking. She could sense the tension in the air, the anticipation of what was to come. "You're ready?" he asked, his voice low but steady, as though he already knew the answer. Emma took a deep breath, her heart pounding in her chest. "I'm ready," she replied, her voice unwavering despite the fear swirling inside her. Dante stood beside her, his eyes scanning the horizon. For a moment, there was silence between them, but it was the kind of silence that spoke volumes. Emma had become part of his world, and now, the time had come to prove her worth. "You've done well so far," Dante said, his tone softened just slightly, though it still held the same edge of authority. "But this is the real test. You've earned their trust, but now you have to decide what kind of person you want to be." Emma glanced at him, sensing the weight of his words. "I've already made my choice," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm in this, Dante. All the way." Dante nodded, the corner of his mouth curling into a small smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Good. Because in this world, loyalty is everything. And loyalty isn't just about standing by someone's side. It's about doing what needs to be done when the time comes." Emma's chest tightened at his words. She knew exactly what he meant. This wasn't just about playing the game. It was about surviving it. And survival in Dante's world meant making choices that would haunt her forever. She had already crossed several lines. How many more would she have to cross before this game ended? Dante turned to face her, his eyes searching hers. "Do you understand what you're up against now?" he asked, his voice low, almost like a warning. Emma nodded, though a small part of her still felt the weight of uncertainty. She had seen the violence that existed in this world, and she had watched Dante manipulate and control those around him. But now, she realized something. She was just as much a part of this world as he was. She had made choices, and those choices had consequences. "I do," she said quietly, her voice steady. "Then it's time," Dante replied, his gaze hardening. "The Volkovs won't back down. We strike first, and you need to be ready for what comes next." Emma's heart skipped a beat. She had expected this, but the reality of it hit her hard. There was no more preparation, no more games. This was real. This was the moment when everything she had done up until now would either make or break her. She turned to face him, her resolve hardening. I'm ready. Dante studied her for a long moment before giving a small nod. I knew you would be. We move out tonight. The words hung in the air like a final declaration. Emma could feel the weight of it all, the decision to trust Dante, to walk this dangerous path. She wasn't just a pawn anymore. She had become a player in this game, a game that demanded everything from her. As they walked toward the elevator, Emma's mind was already racing. She had crossed a line she couldn't come back from, and now she had to face the consequences. The Volkovs were dangerous, and this would be the most dangerous move she had made yet. But she had made her choice. She had chosen Dante's world, and now she had to prove that she belonged in it. As the elevator doors closed, Emma felt the rush of adrenaline flood her veins. This was it. There was no turning back now. Whatever happened, she had to stay ahead of the game. She couldn't afford to fail. Not now. Not when everything she had worked for was on the line. The game was about to reach its climax, and Emma was ready to play. She had made it this far, and she wasn't going to let anything, or anyone, stand in her way. Immerse yourself in a world of intense emotions and power struggles with these thrilling romance stories. Emma's journey into a dangerous underworld unfolds with each step she takes, balancing between trust and betrayal. From the high-stakes challenges with Mafia bosses to the chilling tension of a forbidden alliance, this gripping story will keep you hooked. As Emma navigates through the dangerous territory of Mafia families, her loyalty and resilience are tested, and she is forced to make difficult choices. Romance stories often explore the complexities of love and trust, but here, the stakes are higher as Emma's involvement in this treacherous world takes unexpected turns. As she proves her worth and faces deeper challenges, Emma learns that loyalty is not just a matter of words, but actions. In these captivating romance stories, power, control, and trust are the foundations of every relationship. The story builds with each decision Emma makes, leading her into the heart of conflict. The line between love and survival becomes increasingly blurred as she faces enemies on all sides. These romance stories are not just about passion. They are about power, control, and the unbreakable bonds that are formed in the most dangerous of circumstances. Whether it's love or loyalty at stake, the choice between the two becomes a matter of life and death. Emma's involvement in this world of intrigue and deception is a roller coaster ride, filled with romance stories that keep you wondering what will happen next.